For more than 2 decades, we've been educating our listeners about financial topics that are most important to you. Do you have enough money to retire? How will you keep from running out of money? What's your plan for managing market risk? What about taxes, inflation, and healthcare? Each week, we talk with an advisor at Lucia Capital Group about these issues and more. This is Managing Your Financial Future. Managing Your Financial Future. Welcome back to the podcast. Johnny Dean, your podcast host. Normally, I'm here with my longtime friend and colleague, Professor Rick Plum, who's been doing these with me for decades now. Not just podcasts, but TV shows, radio shows, and all that. But every once in a while, I get the chance to tell Plum to step outside and bring in somebody else, another person who is in the financial planning business. I want to welcome my good friend. Can I call you good friend, Ara Freedman?
I think we've known each other long enough.
I think we have. I never know when to tell some. You know. I've known you for a number of years because you've been around for a number of years.
Yeah, I've been here, I think, 12, 13 years, something like that.
Has it been that long?
It's been that long. Can you believe that?
I'm not astounded. I just can't believe time has gone so quickly. You are a wealth manager at Lucia Capital Group.
Correct.
And you meet with clients, and you do a lot of that, the financial planning things that financial planners do.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I try to make it a little bit less boring when I meet with my clients because, you're talking about numbers and investments all the time.
Right.
But,
right.
Yep, that's my go-to. I actually got my MBA in financial planning from CLU last year. So
CLU, which is?
Cal Lutheran University.
There you go.
Up in Thousand Oaks.
Okay,
so.
There you go. Yeah, a lot of non-Californians may be listening, and they're like, "Well, isn't that a chartered, legal underwriter?" No, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, no.
That's where you got that. So you've been working in this for a long time.
This is my bread and butter, right?
Yeah.
It's basically the only thing I know.
Well, that's good. There are aspects of financial planning that Professor Plum and I cover every week. I shouldn't say every week because it changes over the weeks. But there's one thing that we haven't talked about a lot, and this is why I'm having you on, because you had mentioned this to me that you would love to bring this particular topic up, and I said, gosh, we haven't talked about this at all because this doesn't really fall into Professor Plum's wheelhouse necessarily. But this has to do with elderly parents, finances, and what would you say? I want to say protecting them from predatory
it's just really
scams and all that stuff.
Kind of, but really what I want to do is kind of bring to light it's something that everybody's going to have to deal with, and for some reason it's just been happening more and more often with clients' children, and it's just really about helping your parents, right?
Yeah.
Elderly parents with their finances, because at some point in time, they're not going to be able to manage the complexity of everything that's going on with the finances. It could be paying your bills. It could be managing the investments. It could be, just taking, just going to the grocery store. It just happens to everyone, and I've seen it.
It's going to happen to all of us. I mean, eventually, if we're lucky to live that long, we will be in a situation where maybe somebody else is going to have to help us with the things that we normally associate with being in control. And one of the, like driving a car, that's always a big thing when you decide you can't drive anymore. That's a rough thing.
Yeah, I have to tell you, John, it was kind of scary when we had to tell my grandpa, because my grandpa was, old World War II vet.
Oh, man.
He was a dentist and he was a medic and he's seen some stuff. But when we try to tell him, hey, you probably shouldn't drive anymore, no, sir.
No,
even when he was driving on the wrong side of the road and we're honking at him, Grandpa, what are you doing?
Isn't that awful?
He's just, oblivious, and it's scary because you love them, you want to take care of them, but, sometimes they need a little push.
They need a little help. And finances are not, personal finances are not all that difficult if you know them. But, and I've seen this with my father-in-law. I'll just say that. He had a few years ago, he was always a sharp guy, engineer, numbers, but just couldn't keep track of when the bills were due anymore.
Yep.
And so a family member took it over, and they were okay with that. But these are the things we're going to be talking about here. Now, we've broken this up into just 3 different categories, although there are several things that you need to look out for. But let's talk about these individually here. The first one, as we kind of alluded to with elderly parents, is some kind of mental signs of mental decline, not necessarily Alzheimer's, but maybe heading toward there.
Yeah, one thing I've seen is a lot of times clients don't realize, they're I don't want to say they're kind of slowing down or everything like that, or even clients' parents,
Yes.
who I help as well. Really, it's never a bad idea to have, a trusted, contact or someone that you trust, either a child or someone who's part of the trust or something of that sort, to kind of come along and tag along, so they can kind of have an idea of what's going on. So if there's ever a case where, hey, you know what, mom or dad, it's time for me to kind of take over, but it's not so much as taking over. There's, they're still going to be a part of it, but just kind of, the day-to-day making decisions, because there's going to come a point in time where, how much stock do I purchase of this, or, what's the best idea for it just becomes overwhelming.
Yeah,
so to have someone there who can kind of talk you through, and just a second or third set of eyes.
So in other words, somebody, so if you're the person and you've been a long time, and you're getting older, it might be a good idea to have a family member that you trust or somebody you trust.
Yep.
That can maybe come in with you. Is that what you're saying? To a meeting and say, let's just have a third set of eyes or ears or whatever on this.
Yep.
But it's got to be somebody you trust.
Absolutely, right.
I mean, and that's sometimes that, and we'll get to that in just a second. But that can sometimes be an issue. But it does happen, whether you want to admit it or not. Yeah, it does happen where you're just not as sharp as you once were.
And then one thing you can do is, if you feel, it might be in your best interest to set up a financial POA. Power of attorney.
Power of attorney.
Right.
Yeah.
Just God forbid, something happens and you're no longer mentally capacitated, or you just don't have the capacity to take care of it, and you need a distribution, you need to sell something, you need to get access to funds. Well, if you don't have that, guess what? You're not going to be able to get access to your funds.
Well, would you suggest, as far as power of attorney, would you suggest it's wise for somebody who may be still 15 years away from getting into that situation? Would you suggest that they set it up sooner rather than later?
You're not going to like my answer. I'm going to say it depends.
Okay. Well, that's always our answer.
Yeah, right.
That's always our answer.
It depends. Every situation is different. Of course, it could make sense, but you have to look at it at a case by case basis. For example, I have clients who have their kids as a financial POA in case something happens to them. They're not bringing them in yet, right? They're kind of standoffish, but they have someone there just in case something happens.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you could set it up as a power. What just for those that don't know, what does if I assign financial power of attorney to, my two kids or whatever, what power does that give them right now? Any? I mean, can they just write checks if they wanted to?
They could if they wanted to. That's why it's got to be someone you trust, right? Yeah. But they have full access. They have full control if they come in there with the POA. Usually, if you have a good relationship with a financial advisor, you're going to know beforehand, hey, you know what, Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, okay, I understand. You can always bring a letter, if you're the POA, you can bring a letter that from the doctor, right? Saying that there's a lack of, mental ability or something of that sort. But yeah, you're signing off on them to write checks whenever they want.
Well, and it may not be, gradual decline. You could have an accident of some kind, right? Where you're not conscious. You could be,
you could be in the bathtub, right? Getting out and then slipping and then
whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
So, so financial power of attorney, but you would caution that you do so very, very carefully.
Absolutely.
Don't get your neighbor.
No.
I mean, it's, things happen when people get money.
Yeah. People change once there's dollar signs involved.
Oh, have I seen that? Oh my gosh. All right. Well, so as people start to lose their mental, it sounds bad to say this. I don't want to say their mental faculties. People know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You just kind of lose brain cells as you get older, and the stuff that you did easily when you were in your 50s, 60s, and prior to that starts to become a little more difficult or confusing as you get older. So set up a financial power of attorney would be the first thing for that.
Yep. And, the most important thing to remember is, you may be seeing it yourself with your parents, and it's a tough conversation to have, but it's a conversation that eventually you're going to need to have with them. And it's better to have it now while they're still, how do I say, they still have the mental fortitude to understand.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
Versus waiting where it's too late.
And once it's too late, it really is too late.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you have, one who's still alive or whatever, and that's helpful. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. And then the second one, that was the first one. The second one that you run across a lot is scams.
Yeah, scams. It's it's incredible. And, these people who are scammers, if they would just put their brain power into doing good, man, they could make such a difference. It's just, it's especially now with technology, you hear about AI coming out and, people mimicking people's voices.
Yeah.
It's just, it's crazy, I don't want to scare people, but,
maybe you should in some instances.
I mean, for example, John, my, I think this happened probably a couple years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. My mom calls me and she calls me very worried. She's like, Ara, where are you? And I'm like, I'm at work in my office. She's like, you're not in Peru? I'm like, why would I be in Peru, Mama? I'm here in the office working. And she's like, but you've never been to Peru. I'm like, no, Mom, I've never been to Peru. She's like, well, someone just called your grandfather pretending that you were locked in a jail in Peru
and needed money
money that they needed to bribe the judge to get you out so you wouldn't be stuck there. And I'm like, wait, what? And then it kind of like, I was kind of like taken back for a little bit. It's like, well, did he send the money? He's like, well, they asked for like $5,000. I'm like, $5,000? That's what I would be trying to call my grandpa for? $5,000? Like, what? And she's like, yeah, but the when he tried to wire the funds, luckily the gentleman who was there was telling him like, hey, no, it's a scam. Make sure,
like at a bank,
like at the bank. He's like, make sure you talk to either his parents or him before you actually send the funds out. So luckily he did that. He called my mom and my dad, and they're like, no, ours. And that's when my mom called me freaking out.
It sounds real. And again, as people's ability to think, their cognitive abilities decline, that they can't necessarily see themselves, it sounds plausible to them. They don't necessarily have the same reasoning faculties. You and I might look at this as we are younger, and we might say, well, that's ridiculous. Who would fall for that?
Yep.
But people do.
Yeah, people do. And, my if you're a grandparent or a parent, you love them unconditionally. You do whatever you can. And unfortunately, these scammers, they pry on that and they take advantage of it. And it does, you just want to do what's right and help your loved one. And so.
Yeah, you do. They'll do this on computers. They do this on email. They will call you and tell you that there's a problem with your computer. You've been locked out of your bank.
Don't pay anyone in what's it called? In the gift cards.
Yeah, you need to go to Best Buy and get gift cards.
Yeah.
And read us the number, or Target. Have you ever seen these videos? I would recommend people watch them, where they're baiting these scam people.
Yep.
These scam baiting type.
Yeah.
Pretending to be old people.
Yep.
They're worth a watch, folks. Anybody listening, so you get an idea of what these scammers will do, and they all pretend to be old people being scammed. Of course, these are computer experts.
Yep. And then you see them finding the location and everything. And it's really funny.
I love it. I love it. But it's eye-opening too.
Yeah.
As to see how these people work, and if you can alert your parents to doing that. So some of the solutions. I mean, obviously, Ara, you can't be around your parents unless, I guess, they live with you. But even then, can't be around them 24 hours a day, keeping an eye on them.
Really what it comes down to is open communication, right? Just tell your parents or, your loved ones, hey, if something seems kind of fishy or a red flag, just call me, right? Just like we said before, a second set of eyes, right? Just to kind of double check something. There's no solution, right? You can't stop every single scammer, but at least that way, if you have open communication with your loved ones, hopefully, you can mitigate the damage.
Yeah. Hang up if they're on the phone and look up the real number of whoever's calling you from your bank.
Yep. Because remember, your bank's never going to ask you for your social security number or your account number, and it's any fishy stuff like that.
Which seems, again, to me, I don't think I would ever fall for that. But I don't know, 30 years from now.
Yeah.
I mean who knows what with all this, as you said, AI, artificial intelligence. I don't know what I may eventually fall for.
Yeah.
So it's always a good idea to question it. And I know when they call some of these people, you said your grandfather, they were pretending to be you. The scammers often say, don't, please don't tell mom or dad, please don't tell anybody. I'm going to get in so much, they're going to kill me. And so the grandparents say, well, okay, all right, I won't say anything, just between us. Yeah. And that can prevent them from, calling. I'm glad your grandfather did that. It sounds like almost generic advice, but there isn't much more you can do. Open communication. I mean, it seems basic, but
and I wish there was a better way,
yeah.
just scam blocker or something like that. But unfortunately, there's no fancy cure-all.
No, be very careful with that. So scams, obviously. Now, under the subheading of scams, you may want to talk about for a moment about some unscrupulous family members who, maybe you've got 3 kids, 2 of them are doing okay financially and 1 is not, and mom has, a bunch of money in the bank, and, the one that's kind of like, again, when money comes into play and they say,
people change.
I see a solution to my money problems here, and it's my mom.
Well, don't make them a POA.
Well,
don't do that, John.
Well, you're correct. We're joking, but we're not joking. But is there anything you can do about that? I mean, I've seen family members that get in fights because one needs the money and is trying to coax mom into, making them POA.
The truth of the matter is it almost taps into, like our third topic about like the lack of organization and you can't keep up with the finances.
Yeah.
Getting a trust or an estate plan, right? It takes everything out of play with anybody else trying to put in their hooks in or anything of that sort, because it's got to follow the plan of what the estate plan says.
And is that even true when the person is alive, right? I mean, this is not something that a living trust is one that's alive.
Yep.
Basically.
Yeah,
right?
and it can change.
What can a trust do to help?
It could basically help you make sure your wishes are followed, right? When you're no longer here, or even while you're still alive, right?
Yeah.
That's why it's important to have, someone that you trust, such as your kids, and then as well as, an estate attorney who can set that up for you. You got your will, your power of attorney, your medical directive, kind of just organizing, putting everything in one spot. So when that time does come, because you never know when it's going to be, it really comes down to organization and planning ahead. And
it doesn't have to cost you, $10,000, right? It depends on obviously the size of your estate
and everything,
and how complicated and what controls you want to maintain.
Exactly, right. But there's, I wouldn't recommend doing it online. I would recommend doing it with someone that you trust and building a relationship as if you have a relationship with your financial planner.
You're talking about like an estate planning attorney.
Correct. Right.
So you're not that keen on the online.
Sure. Right. You can do it. Right. But it's better. It's like you can get financial advice online, but does it pertain to you? No. Right. You put in a questionnaire. For me, I'm kind of old school. Right. I like to talk to someone. Mm-hmm. I like to, feel them out. And then if you have questions or ideas, right, it's not as cookie cutter, right?
So you can go to these places that will do a trust for you online, right? You know the type of, what I'm talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And is that generally, is it a cost reason?
It's usually a cost reason because, a lot of times they're just mills, right? They use it and they send it out.
Well, you can, $400 or $500
and
you get
get everything done. But the truth of the matter is do you really want to, there's certain things you don't want to go cheapo on, right?
Sure, of course.
Yeah. So it's I would kind of pucker up and have to, pay a little bit more to make sure my wishes are taken care of.
It's very, very important to do so, which, as you said, kind of leads into that third, well, we're kind of talking about it anyway, where people can, the third category of this is that people can no longer keep up with their finances. They can't organize it anymore. But there's also them feeling like, well, if I give this up, then I've got no control over my life anymore.
Yep.
I did see this with a family member who was just, always on top of the bills, but we could see that he was forgetting.
Yeah. And
he couldn't remember. And he just wanted to write a check. He didn't do online. He'd stick a stamp on, but things were getting late.
Yeah. And that's the thing is we see it a lot with, with my clients, and they're helping their parents. It's, the parents are afraid to give up that control, right? That lack of control. And it's scary. And, one thing that you can always do, a solution for that is, meet with your parents' financial advisor or their CPA or their estate attorney, and just kind of help them get organized, make sure everything's in order. Make sure you got that estate plan done and that POA, the power of attorney. It's just one of those things that it's pretty simple, right? It comes down to,
be a part of their financial lives. Now, I'm sure you've seen this because you've been doing this for a long time, where parents, especially ones of my parents' generation, you didn't talk about finances. You didn't even bring up how much, growing up, I never knew how much my parents made. I never knew how much was in the bank. I didn't care.
Yep.
But, they were kind of that ilk where it was like, don't ask me about my finances. It's a private matter.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a private matter for whatever reason.
Yep. And the truth is, the parents don't have to give up the information of what's on there, right? They don't have to tell you exactly like, oh, hey, this is X amount here, X amount there. I have some people who have big old spreadsheets and they say, okay, if something happens to me, here you go, follow these instructions. Rule number 1, call Ara. Rule number 2, listen to Ara. Rule number 3, do what Ara tells you. Right?
Well, that's nice.
So, it doesn't have to be like that. But what it comes down to is at least guiding them so they know where to go and find the assets and talk to the right people.
So if somebody's afraid to have their kids know how much they have because it's private to them, there's still ways they can do this without necessarily giving the numbers to their kids.
Correct.
Now, what about kids what should the kids do whose parents are in that situation, but they won't the parents won't relent? So, I mean, how does the child of this type of parents
I don't know
bring this up?
I don't know the relationship, but it's like, hey, it's just talking to them, right? It's just having open communication, like we said. Is like, hey, mom, dad, I'm here to help you, right? Let me know if there's anything I can do.
Can you suggest, like, I know you're meeting with your planner. Would you mind if I tag along?
Yep.
I don't have to know anything if you don't want to give me anything, but I would love to know how everything is set up.
Yeah, you can do that. That's
just a hard thing to do for some people.
It really is, right? I've had, unfortunately, right, I've had plenty of clients who have become elderly and, we have to get someone else involved.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing is when no one becomes involved and then all of a sudden we don't hear from the client and, 6 months go by and we find out they passed away, and it's horrible because, trying to track them down, figure out who the heirs are and all this stuff.
And the heirs didn't know anything about
the heirs
right?
didn't know about us. And, it's just, you want to make sure that financial house is in order.
Yeah, there's a teamwork, a certain amount of teamwork involved, but you've also got the emotional side with the families, and family dynamics can be very difficult.
Yep. Professor
Plum has said, I've gotten phone calls from people who are still in the hospital. Hey, Dad just died 2 minutes ago. Put me in the, and Professor says, whoa, wait, hold on a second. I don't even know who you are.
Exactly.
So it's important that everybody is involved.
And that's really, that's why we go back to kind of getting everything set up and having, just like financial planning, all right?
Mm-hmm.
You make sure everything is working for the right goal. You want to make sure in estate planning, right? You want to make sure everything that you have is working towards the right goal. So when that time comes, there's no guesswork, right? We already, you build the plan, you work the plan. There's no magic involved.
No, that's true. And since we don't know when that's coming, probably sooner the better.
Yep.
I would suggest. Ara Freedman, thanks so much for joining me today.
Not a problem.
It's always good when I get somebody else. It's hard enough to get advisors because they just want to do the numbers. They want to sit in the office and they microphone. I'm not sure I want to do that. But it's good to get other perspectives on some of this stuff because, like I said, Professor Plum doesn't. I mean, he does deal with it, but some of this stuff that you've talked about today is not necessarily in his specialty. So it's good to get somebody else's perspective on this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the trenches every single day. We like to say, I'm helping as many people as I can. And, thank you for having me on.
I do appreciate it. If you want to get in touch with anyone at Lucia Capital Group, Professor Plum, Ara Freedman, wealth manager, you can do so at 800-644-1150. 800-644-1150. Longtime sponsors of this particular podcast and all that. Lucia Capital Group. Also go online to luciacap.com. Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast, Spotify, iTunes, all of that. Download it. Listen to every single week. We got a whole bunch more topics to discuss before the end of this season, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. My thanks again to Ara Freedman, wealth manager at Lucia Capital Group. For Ara and everybody else, I'm Johnny Dean, your podcast host. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you again next week. You should always seek counsel of the appropriate advisor prior to making any investment decision. All investments are subject to risk, including the loss of principal. No client or prospective client should assume that the information presented serves as the receipt of or a substitute for personalized advice from Lucia Capital Group or from any other investment professional. Social Security rules can be complex. For more information about Social Security benefits, visit the SSA website at ssa.gov or call 800-772-1213 to speak with an SSA representative. Examples cited are hypothetical, are for illustrative purposes only, are not guaranteed, and subject to potential federal and state law amendments. There is no guarantee that you will achieve the results discussed or illustrated. Ara Freedman and Rick Plum are registered representatives with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Lucia Capital Group, a separate entity from LPL Financial.